for the first 10 years, you went from what size to what number of employees? And then once you started accelerating and doubling down, what is your employee count now? Just so that everyone has a frame of reference. First 10 years?
Yeah, we were, I have this data in the system, but I think we were about 80 employees at 2019. I got it from 0 to 80 employees. And we were doing 2 million a year pretty consistently for like 3 or 4 years straight. And that's when I was like, we need to make some changes because I was gradually making things better, but it wasn't making marked improvements. And so that's when we made the change in 2019. And then so in 2020, we doubled 4 million and then 8 million and then 12 and then 15. And so, yeah, and then it's been onward and upward from there. And so, we've now done, this is our coming up on 17 years since it began, but which is really insane. But we're going to cross the threshold here in Q1 of 100 million in revenue build, which I think, is a big number that, most search companies that do that annually, which is, would be phenomenal. We're not there, but to hit that mark is like, okay, we have a business that's generated considerable value for companies that we work with, and they've been willing to pay us for that.
Welcome to Fearless Founders Club again. Everyone, we're really excited to have you join us. We've got my personal friend and now Ike's friend, Carson Poppenger, who's the CEO of Squeeze Media. He has a great story and we're going to jump into it right away. And part of the reason Carson is here is because of the pivots that he's had to make in his business to get it to be a success. And it's fantastic. It's great to hear. So Carson, welcome. Ike and I are very happy to have you here, mate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to reconnect with you, Binoy, and chat about business. And nice to meet you, Ike, as well. So looking forward to it.
Welcome.
Hey, let's jump in. So when I met you last, 20 years ago, you were taking care of marketing at Prosper, an education marketing company with big names. You were monetizing the data. And then all of a sudden you said, hey, let me start something on my own. So take us through that. Give us a 5-minute journey, will you?
Yeah. So, I originally went to school for business management, and that was sort of my track I was on in college and after college, and just always interested in, learning about businesses and running businesses. And then I ultimately was within the company working at Prosper in their marketing department. And they were generating, acquiring and creating and generating 10,000 inquiries a week roughly for their marketing programs. And, they had 3 million records in their database that were unconverted. And, 95% of all the people that were purchasing the program would purchase within the first few weeks. Leads would be assigned to the sales agent. They would follow up and talk to the customer, making their own outbound phone calls. And they would get a hold of a certain number of those, percentage of those. And then they would, it was 40 leads per week, actually, that each sales agent got. We had about 500 salespeople. And they just made their own calls, and they would get people on the phone. And then, before Salesforce was implemented, we were all, operating with paper leads and things like that. This is way back in the day. And so paper leads were distributed, and then they would be pulled back to the marketing team. And, what we found was that when we implemented Salesforce, and we said, let's take all the leads that are assigned to each sales rep that are currently open, and let's put those into Salesforce and assign them to those agents electronically. And we did that. And then what that resulted in was 400 to 500 records were assigned to each, sales agent that were just sort of sitting there in the wood pile, if you will, and were not being followed up with. If the sales agent felt like, oh, this is a really hot one, I'm going to hold on to it, they would sort of earmark that one and maybe follow up later. But what we found with the data was that 95+% of the sales that were happening would happen initially when the person first inquired. And so what we did was we built a marketing automation program where we would follow up with those records. We would email, direct mail, we would call them, we would invite them to, webinars and conference calls and things. And we would start drip marketing to those folks And I was just fascinated with it. We'd have someone that inquired March of the year before, and then now it's the prior March, and the consumer received a direct mail piece. They would call in and then speak with the sales agent and purchase the program, and that's just like found revenue. And I love that aspect of it, and I love the mining for gold kind of aspect of it. And I said, there's businesses that probably need help with this, and there's businesses that could probably benefit from this as a service. So in mid 2008, I kind of started working on plans and ideas to start my own company. And that journey was involved a few people that we started the business with, and then ultimately for different reasons they couldn't continue staying involved in the business, and went separate ways and directions. And I ended up sort of the lone survivor, I guess, if you will, of the business, and just continued building it. And it was it was painful. It was self-funded, brick by brick. We use credit cards and AR, accounts receivable, to just, that next account that we get, if it's a little bit bigger, we can, have a little more margin to continue to invest in the business. And we got it to a point where it was sort of like, 10 years, sort of brick by brick, and just sort of grinding it out. And then I realized, I need to probably do some things differently. And there's things that I've learned along the way, but there's things that I don't know, and things that I would like to have experience with. And so I partnered with a capital partner in 2019. And we ran out year one together as partners, equal partners. In 2019, we split the business, and at the end of 2019, after 12 months, we were flat. And I was like, this is the bad decision. We shouldn't have done this, kind of a thing was my reaction and my thought at the time, because like now we've got another partner and we're splitting everything, and the business has not grown, it's the same. And then we doubled down our efforts and hired a few people. We hired a new chief operating officer, and we hired a CFO that had experience working in the space that we're in. And they were valuable additions to the team. We doubled down on our sales efforts and relationship building and things like that. In 2020, we doubled the business the next year. And then we doubled the business again the third year, the fourth year. And then basically in 2024, I was able to effectively get the business to a point where I was able to help my partner retire from the business and regain, majority control of the business and continue growing it. From this point, we've grown since that point another 30%, since that exit. And so that's been exciting. We have, I've heard it said with, operations, that sometimes people will say, yeah, I did it all myself. It was all me. And it really wasn't. There's a lot of different people involved at different steps of the game. That partner of mine, he was, obviously a big piece of changing the way that I looked at things. I learned a lot about financial management that I really had no experience with prior to that. And so we started tracking a lot of the, really gross margin not hourly, but day by day, looking at what's our gross margin on every single account we're doing, day by day, week by week, month by month. And then we can make incremental improvements on that. And we did that. We started raising our gross margin. We've raised our gross margin since we started doing that by 12 to 14 points, some accounts by 30 points. And so, just really changing the way that we look at the business and manage the business. And, that was an evolution. We also have some tremendous key players on our team today that really understand what our clients need, how to communicate with them, how to fulfill and deliver services and the quality and value that they want.
So if I may, just for numbers so that people can relate, for the first 10 years, you went from what size to what number of employees? And then once you started accelerating and doubling down, what is your employee count now? Just so that everyone has a frame of reference. First 10 years?
Yeah, we were, I have this data in the system, but I think we were about 80 employees at 2019. I got it from 0 to 80 employees, and we were doing 2 million a year pretty consistently for like 3 or 4 years straight. And that's when I was like, we need to make some changes, because we're, I was gradually making things better, but it wasn't making marked improvements. And so that's when we made the change in 2019. And then so in 2020, we doubled 4 million, and then 8 million, and then 12, and then 15. And so, yeah, and it's been onward and upward from there. And so, we've now done, this is our coming up on 17 years since it began, but which is really insane. But we're going to cross the threshold here in Q1 of 100 million in revenue build, which I think, is a big number that, most search companies that do that annually, which is, would be phenomenal. We're not there, but to hit that mark is like, okay, we have a business that's generated considerable value for companies that we work with, and they've been willing to pay us for that. And
Yeah,
that's
fantastic. How many employees now approximately?
we hit 560 this year, and right now Q4, Q1, things slow down a little bit with our clients. As a marketing service provider, they're gearing up for their plans for the new year, so we always see a little bit of a slowdown with our staffing through this period of the year, January. And but we'll be back up. We'll exceed 600 this year, and maybe more. We'll see. We have a lot of new business that we're working on, and that's exciting. So
Congrats.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've got lots of questions, because I got lots to bombard the man. What are your questions?
I think at the top of my list is that the mindset you were in, like after you got the money, like, and then a few months or quarters pass by and nothing is improving, you decide to hire those people. I'm interested in those few months, like how did you pull yourself out of that? Like, what was the mindset? What helped you? Because we are here on this podcast to help the next generation, and I know a lot of founders who are stuck in their business. They are tired, it's not growing, and it becomes like a quicksand for them. I'm trying to get some nuggets from you for them to be able to like break through.
Yeah, no, I think that I totally understand. Prior to doing transaction with the partner, I was, it was like in that moments where it's like, okay, is it time to quit? Is it time to do something different? Is this just not going to work? And I went back to the clients that we were working with and the relationships that we had, and they loved what we were doing. There were things that we certainly could do to improve and become better and become who we are today. But largely we had a good reputation, and we had, those relationships that sort of kept me going. I always have to have like a little bit of a blind optimism, and maybe too dumb to quit. That was sort of probably me from 2009 to 2019, in those 10 years. And I would live off of those like little things, that nuggets of goodness that would come, where I'm like, wow, there'd be moments where I'm in the car and I'm just like pumping my fist that like something good happened, and I'm like, okay, this is a validation, and I can't really talk about it or tell anyone about it. They won't probably appreciate it or understand it, but I'm excited about that. And you have those moments, and then you have those moments when you're like, man, I don't think I can tell anyone about this, because they'll be scared for me or worried, or if the bad things that the frustrating things that go on, or the financial frustrations and things like that. But in that year of 2019 to 2020, I again was like, okay, what do we need to do to change to get things to work to a better place, and what is it that's needed? And we knew it was more client accounts and relationships and revenue. But I've talked with a few people recently who have their own small businesses. Some of them are working by themselves. They have like either they're the only employee, or they have one employee, and they do all the work themselves. And I see the weight that they carry, and I see it feels like, how can I ever do anything different and get ahead when I'm doing so many things? And that was me. I was doing, business development, sales. I was doing the operations management. I was doing the accounting. I was doing marketing, and all of it kind of as good as I could for the time that I had available. And the idea was, I can't pay anybody to do this, so I'm just going to do it myself. And I enjoy all those aspects of things. I mean, I'm doing legal, reviewing legal agreements and all that myself in those times. And I like the variety. So like, that was kind of fun for me. Like, it didn't bother me, where some people maybe are completely like in numbers only, don't want to touch creative marketing or sales. And I was able to kind of accomplish a little bit of all of it myself. But I've seen some people that are in those moments where they're doing everything themselves. And the thing the thought that I had that came to my mind was, they're probably not tracking this, but it was an eye opener for me, was what is the gross margin on what you're doing, and what can you pay someone to do that for you? And you can't scale yourself. And so what would you be willing to, what do you need to pay someone to do this work? Let's say a friend of mine has a window cleaning business, and he's been successful, but he wants to scale it. And, he could probably keep employees working and motivated and doing a good job, and their days full, $30 an hour, $40 an hour. Well, for a 50% gross margin, can you charge someone $60 to $80 an hour and pay someone to do that work for you, so that instead of you making, $100 an hour yourself doing this, maybe you can use the power of, distribute the labor and have other people doing that work and pay them, create good jobs for them. And now you're making, $20 an hour off of everyone that's doing that work. And, I think those are the kind of breakthrough moments some people need for those types of service businesses. I know like every business is a little bit different. There's software companies and things like that. I think, does that help? I have some thoughts.
Yeah, it definitely does. Before I comment on that, I think the optimism you mentioned is part of the entrepreneurship gene. I think every entrepreneur has that at a stupid level sometimes.
Yeah.
For sure. So it comes with the territory. I think it was very helpful. Thank you, because even though everybody's business is different, I think going back to customers and getting re-energized about, am I providing something valuable, just to understand that, and then come back and be a grown-up and look at your business and how you're gonna break through. Where for you it was the margin business, maybe for a software business it might be something else, right? But everybody needs to understand their business anyway and just find the value and then see how you're gonna multiply the value to grow your company.
Yeah, I would say probably to summarize what that could mean to like just any business would be like zooming out from what you're focused on every day. You might be in the details of things every day, the fulfillment or keeping things going, keeping the doors open. But you really need to like elevate your thinking out of that and look at it from, they say 10,000 foot view, looking down, and be able to start solving problems, outside, work on your business instead of in your business. They say that was a big thing that I had to learn, because I was always working on my business. And I was always working in my business rather, and I had to start working on my business. And that was a hard thing for me, because I'm kind of a stubborn person. I think that's like stubbornness is probably part of my personality a little bit. And so that was, to make that change.
I don't want to admit, but I have that un poquito as well.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Yes, I knew that.
It's part of the requirement to succeed
Yeah.
in being your own business owner, I believe.
That's
Ike,
right.
you want to continue? Otherwise, I've got lots of
I'm
questions.
good. All your turn.
Hey, so if you were to advise our viewers and listeners 2 things from your journey that you would make as a recommendation, don't make this mistake or pivot here faster, what would you say, from identifying who your client are to getting outside money to help accelerate to getting talent to offload, pain points, 2 things that you would recommend that you would say with a story?
Yeah, I think having enough cash and funding is really important to growing the business. And I think I was trying to do that without that for such a long time. And if you can find a way to, through angel investors potentially who believe in you, who you can show a proven business model to in a way that doesn't, everyone always told me early on, don't waste your time trying to get money from people, because you'll end up taking everyone to lunch and they're going to ask you to show you presentation decks and spreadsheets and all these kinds of things. And I think there was some truth to that, but I think that having a capital partner, or maybe some lender financing, some loan money to work with, where you can quickly deploy that and get the right people involved and help grow the business that way, I think would be better than just continuing to grind it out the way that I did. If I was going to do it all over again, that's what I would do. I don't think I would take an equity partner necessarily. I would advise against that. I think there's ways to get money and funding creatively without giving away equity. And I've had opportunities to do that since then, where it's just not very an appealing thing to me to sell some equity to someone and then have someone to report to, or someone to get buy-in on every single decision and things like that.
I'm going to interrupt you there with my own conviction of what you just said before you move to your second point. The reason you were able to accelerate your business, from my objective, distant observation, is because you had made the product great, because you had been grinding for so long. You tweaked this. And so to a point, you were ready for the capital. You just weren't open to the idea as you were, neck neck deep in taking care of everything and growing it and realizing I got the right product. Customers love what it is. You just didn't have enough money.
Yeah.
For many of our tech listeners, they already have a product idea. They know what they want to do. They may not have proven it yet. And sometimes we get the money too early, or we need the money just to even prove the concept works to a certain extent before product market fit. For your case, you did 10, 11 years of product market fit. Then you got the money. Then you were able to accelerate. That's why I believe you were able to succeed with the capital at that time. That's just my observation.
Yeah, I agree. And I had a fear of like, if I took capital from someone that I would, maybe disappoint them or it wouldn't work out. And then I would be, there was probably some fear of that in me that was unnecessary. I might have put too much unnecessary, fear around taking funding from someone or taking capital partner. And looking back, I probably should have done that sooner. And that would have allowed us to do things. Because it's funny, because we always think about the people that have been here with me for 10 years. We always think about what things were like back in the 2016, 2017 days when, we were scrappy. It's like our furniture, our chairs, everything was a little bit, uncomfortable looking, smelling, sitting, whatever. And we laughed today about like how things were before and what things look like today. And we weren't able to buy the nicest stuff, or not. We don't even buy the nicest stuff today. I still have sort of a thing of being like frugal with that. Like we get nice stuff. We get things that it's nice enough. And that's kind of where we live now. But the thought of paying, I remember I walked into a business that was right by us, Boostability. I don't know if you remember that company, Benoit. They're here in Utah, and they had an office building behind us, and I had to go over to their building for something. And I was walking in, and they had chair boxes just stacked to the ceiling all over, like all these chairs that they bought. And I was like, those chairs, that's like $20,000 worth of chairs. I was like, how in the world are they buying $20,000 worth of chairs? I was like, what would that be like? And years later, we got into a new office in Orem, and we spent, like $70,000 on desks, and I was like, wow, like that was sort of a moment where I was like, I can't believe I'm spending $70,000 on desks. But they were used, they were on the resale market, and they were probably half the price of new. And so, it still made sense to buy those.
We must always manage our money. I'm proud of you. Don't forget those good Asian traits. Do not forget that. Keep it going. So that's lovely. Give us another, what lesson have you learned that you can say, here's what I've learned, apart from making sure you don't delay the capital too much?
I think one thing that I've learned, and one thing that still holds true today, is just having integrity in what I'm doing, and saying, if I make a commitment to a client, to an employee, whatever that might be, I'm careful about the commitments I make, so that I don't ever have to, unfortunately, renege on that commitment, and I think I've done a fairly good job of that over the years. And I think my employees today that have been with us for 10 plus years, they see that, I try to do the right thing. And that's been one of our values as a company, is we do the right thing. And so integrity, I think, is something that served me well as we continue to grow the business. And it helps clients trust us and provide, the services that we provide for them. They may say, this seems like it may not work, but I'm going to trust you. And, so.
Nice. Isn't that great? I see, you can see why you succeeded.
It's it's never a good thing to build a business with short-term gains, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree.
I have so many stories from all of the clients that I work with and interact with, but you can tell already from listening to Carson how grounded he is. He has no foo-foo. He tries to keep his expectations reasonable. And yet, after all of these years, I was so proud of him when I kept seeing him announce that his business was growing, and I saw him everywhere on social media, on LinkedIn. I said, finally, good for him. He's found a pivot point that allowed the growth, and that was the infusion of capital with the right level of business acumen, where he didn't have to do everything himself. I think that is the big lesson that we're getting. Always be a man of integrity and keep that going. For there are too many shallow, short-term people out there. And I'm proud of you for not doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, we've been 17 years now, and I've never been, subpoenaed or in court or anything like that. We've had over 6,000 employees that have worked for us and never had a an issue with, people are always afraid to employ people because the legal risks and all the employment laws. Utah is a very friendly state that way, I would say. So, it doesn't mean we can do whatever we want, but we have a little bit of more freedom, I think, than some states in their employment laws and things like that. But, we just try to treat people well, and there's never, any kind of reason for them to be upset with us. When they leave, I want them to say, well, that didn't work out, but, at least I feel, like it was a good experience and I learned something from it, as an employer-employee relationship. And so I think that's part of it too. So
that's extraordinary. I know.
I have something which is related. Like when I talk to founders, especially struggling with money, capital, like, they're managing the business with the money they raise customers. Basically like selling the product. But when some of the employees don't perform well, it is so emotional for them to give feedback, let them go, because they've been there when the times are tough, and the times might still be tough. And there's one hand, and the loyal to this person, has been with me, for the past 3 years when I didn't have any money, but they're not working out. Like, how am I going to let them go, or how am I going to give them feedback? What's been your approach, and has anything changed after 2019?
The thing that I've had to learn to do is just be more direct with everything, in a polite, positive way, but not allowing things to, if you ignore challenges or problems, they generally just continue to, fester, and things, whether it's an employer-employee relationship, it's not a fit. Sometimes that I've experienced where maybe an employee that's not a fit, the impact they're having on other people around them is multiplied because the frustrations that go around with that person sort of in that role or in that spot. And so I think it's important just to sort of, take those things head on and just don't delay, and just, handle them as they come up, kind of a thing. I think as far as employee feedback in general, I have sort of a philosophy that if you're, generally what happens in companies, I think, is that you'll have a person that's not performing well, but they're nice and you like them, and you're avoiding conflict. So you give them the review, or you tell them, hey, good job. You're doing fine, or maybe you don't say anything at all. Their assumption is that they're doing fine, or that they're doing a good job, and they're never going to be able to improve without that feedback. A good manager, a good leader is able to see someone that's struggling or their performance and be able to give them real meaningful feedback. It's like, this is a problem. We need you to tweak this or do this differently. You need to deliver that as soon as possible, because if you wait, it's just going to, create a different, a dichotomy there where the people think they're doing a great job. And then when you finally do have to address it, they're going to feel like maybe it's personal, or you're not being honest, or you're trying to get rid of them or something like that. And then, for people that I tell our managing our frontline employees, you'll be able to tell pretty early on if someone's not a fit in the sales role, because we do a lot of sales in our work. So document everything, just have a habit of documenting the conversations and the performance and things like that. So when it comes time to have that conversation, this isn't the first time that they've heard this, and they'll know from past conversations. And then we have all the documentation. I think that's where small businesses fall often, is not having documentation on performance issues and things. And then they just have to go and fire someone. And that's what results in a lot of problems.
Yeah, I can't be before I give you the microphone. Like I have two takes from what I heard from Carson. One is to the entrepreneurs: be direct, don't delay it, don't sweep under the rug. Sooner the better, and then do your homework. Like, I think those are good advice. But when you said you have this philosophy, and that's how your sentence started, I hear this a lot from experienced entrepreneurs. You have a philosophy on this. I have a philosophy on raising money. I have a philosophy on talking to employers. I have a philosophy on how to manage my money. Philosophy on how to be frugal. I think the young entrepreneurs need to spend some time on the business or on themselves to create these philosophies, so that they can have these principles guide them instantly, rather than trying to think through every day, what am I going to do today? How should I act today? Maybe creating those is very useful on every aspect of the business, and that's their job, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen it. A lot of my philosophies have come from past employers I've worked with, and, business leaders who, situations where maybe I feel like they didn't handle it properly. And that comes back in my mind. And I think, okay, I learned what doesn't work and how not to do that. I should do it. I should follow this other path or process. But yeah, I have lots of philosophies. The guys will tell you, the team will tell you
I'm
when,
sure.
when it comes to sales. This week I was like, we rolled out where we're actually selling a program for a company. And this isn't something we've done for a few years. And we rolled it out. They're making sales. And I said, sales methodology are we using? And I looked into it and I wasn't comfortable. I felt like this is, we can employ this sales methodology, this philosophy with approaching the sales calls. And we're going back now and retooling it to the way that it should have been. Because sometimes we just, let things happen and people have good intentions and they try their best. But then, you have things that you've seen that have worked well and you need to, employ those best practices. And, that comes too, like when you hire like an HR director or something like that. I was doing HR by myself for a long time. And then we finally hired like an HR person. And it was nice just to like not have to worry about that function anymore and let them handle it. They have their own experience, philosophies, and know-how that they can employ. And we trust our people, to do the right thing.
So I'm going to summarize what I've heard, and this is fantastic. You have an unusual depth of leadership experience that most software founders don't have. You already came from a company that had 500 plus employees. You already knew how to lead and communicate. Your gentleness should not be mistaken for niceness, for you are kind and direct and you address things properly and quickly when it comes to rectifying behavioral changes. You document. Those are skills and experience showing through from having worked somewhere else. And those are valuable elements that our viewers and listeners can learn from you on. You also had a product that you worked on for so long, that maybe too long, that when the capital did come in, and some experts were put into their seats, including you being put in your seat that you should have been put in. Then the business took off, right? And the business took off because then everyone had the right seat on the right bus and everyone was able to escalate their talents and magnify it, I guess is the right way to say it. Keeping the integrity up is absolutely right. And the fact that you said even the other lesson, right? Don't delay too much, but take the right amount of money when it comes time to do that. Great lessons. Fantastic. Short and sweet. Thank you, Carson. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Anything? Yeah, before we let him go, anything else?
All good. Thank you so much for your wisdom.
He was great. Thank you, Carson.
Thanks for having me here. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to check it out. I've enjoyed all the content you're putting out. It's been so great for executive leadership coaching. All the stories that you're telling are so valuable, and keep doing that. I think that's been such a great thing for me to follow, like on LinkedIn, as I've seen all your experience that you're sharing. And
the good thing is I get to make mistakes every week, so I can post them. So it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. And great stories. Thanks, Carson. Thank you, everyone. Until next week and the next time, keep in tune. Please share this with everybody out there in your network. There's so many who could benefit from Carson's story and wisdom. Thanks again. Bye-bye.